What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Bull Combo. Hope you're doing great. Hope you're having a great day. Today we're reviewing reWelcome, the latest album by Ocala-based heavyweights, A Day to Remember. So stick around when we talk about the album, the divided reception, and all of my thoughts. Alright guys, so before we get started, as always, if you want to support the channel in any way, you can use any of the support options listed down below in the description under the support section. Any of that is appreciated. And if you don't want to help out like that, you can always just help out the channel by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and hitting the bell to get notified when I post new content. Alright guys, so I wanted to preface this by saying that I've been a fan of A Day to Remember since their album For Those Who Have Heart, which was well over 10 years ago. In that time frame, I've seen them probably 5-6 times, and while this doesn't make my opinions correct in any way, shape, or form, but I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of clarity and context in terms of the views that I'm expressing in this video. The album is pretty on par with a standard A Day to Remember sound. Traditionally, the band has utilized a slightly heavier and more low-end heavy sound, and that seems to hold true on this album as well, so from a production quality perspective, it's pretty much the same. Now, from a songwriting perspective, there's a lot more diversity on display in this album, and in some ways, I would say this is probably the most diverse album that A Day to Remember has released to date, and I think in some ways, that is aiding in some of the divided response we're seeing here. There's nothing really done on this album that A Day to Remember hasn't done in previous albums. They've been experimenting with poppier sounds since their first album and since Homesick. If anything, what sets this album apart from previous efforts is how they combine so many versions of themselves into one album. Traditionally, their albums have taken on a sort of tone or genre that they revisit many times on the album. And that seems to hold true for most of their previous efforts. Just using Bad Vibrations as an example, I think the tone on that album was noticeably more heavy than some of the previous efforts. And I think that's just an example of how A Day to Remember tries to latch on to a specific vibe or genre or sound on the album, and they definitely try to stick to that when writing their album. And in many ways, this album does not stick to that formula. It is very different from what A Day to Remember has released. Each one of these songs is a completely different genre, and because of that, each one of these songs has a completely different feeling. So if someone's going into this expecting to hear a bunch of breakdowns, they're probably going to be a little bit let down because that's not consistently across the album. And likewise, if you're going into this looking for a bunch of classic pop punk bangers, you're probably not going to hear those either because there's a lot of diversity on display here. So it really depends on the intent and the intentions with which you go in listening to this album in terms of the opinion you're going to develop as you come out of it. That said, as I listen to the album itself, I really do think that this is an excellent display of A Day to Remember's songwriting ability. With all the overly technical, riff-laden, breakdown-saturated music that's currently out there, it's easy to overlook the difficulty of simplistic songwriting, and A Day to Remember has mastered this on this album. Again, it's really easy to take a collection of riffs, smash them together, throw some lyrics over them, and call them a song. But it's extremely clear that on this album, every single song was thought out at multiple levels, from the sound that they were going for to the topic they were covering. And that leads me to my next thought. A lot of the topics that are covered on this album are much more mature than previous A Day to Remember albums. Long gone are the days of angsty lyrics where they're talking about the fact they hate their town or no one understands them or they hate the long drives in the van. Now they're talking about things that are a little more adult. Things like loss, manipulation, resentment, vacation, and finances. And if someone isn't at that point in life where they can identify with these songs, it can be a little bit more difficult to latch on to them because you don't feel that personal connection to them. So in many ways, I do think that that is also aiding in some of the reason why people are disliking this album, is because they've kind of ditched the ambiguous and vague song lyrics and very basic melodies for a little bit more complex songwriting, where they're tackling topics that are a lot more mature. And in some ways, I think people just want A Day to Remember to be that fun, kid-based band talking about how it sucks to grow up and how it sucks living in your hometown. But the reality is these guys are growing up too, so the topics that they're going to talk about are definitely going to mature as well. Does that mean you have to like the band? Absolutely not. Does it mean you have to like the album? Absolutely not. But I think it's a bit of a stretch to say that this album is outright bad, as I think it's an actual great collection of songwriting, and it really shows the mature songwriting of A Day to Remember on display. The other thing that I wanted to talk about here is the fact that it's really clear this album was meant to be listened to from start to finish. I think in today's age, where it's really easy for us to pick and choose what we listen to and what we experience, it's really easy to ruin the experience that the artist intended for the listener. And I think in this specific case, this album was absolutely intended to be listened to from start to finish. So if you're going through and you're clicking the different YouTube videos and listening to the songs out of order, that can definitely ruin the experience of an album. And some can argue that each song should hold its own weight, and I think it really does if you listen to the album. I think any album that has some sort of message or some sort of flow to it is going to be stronger as a whole than of the individual pieces. And I'd go as far as to say this album has some really, really strong moments. So let's talk about those. So first off, the first song on the album, Brick Wall, this song is going to be a monster live. I don't think the album version of this song really does it enough justice. It lends itself really well to an arena or to a large show. And I think once fans are able to get in and watch this song performed live, there's going to be a lot more appreciation for it. And I actually think the same thing goes for the song Bloodsucker. I do really think that that song was designed to be played and listened to live. And I think it's going to have a different type of energy and a different vibe to it once they can actually perform it. So those are two songs right off the bat that I think have a lot of potential, even more so than on the album itself. And if anything, maybe the album versions of them are holding them back from how truly great they're actually going to be. Then we can move on to some of the catchier songs, like Mind Reader. Mind Reader is a ridiculously catchy song, guys. The entire song, start to finish, is catchy. The chorus gets stuck in your head almost instantly. Same thing for Degenerates. That song is ridiculously catchy as well. Then we have some more of their experimental songs, and personally, I think these three songs are really awesome. And I'm talking about FYM, High Diving, and Everything We Need. These three songs are really just feel-good songs. A Day to Remember has done these before in the past, but I think this is probably the highest frequency of this many songs like this on one album. And really, I love these songs. Every single one of these songs has a really positive, uplifting vibe to it, and it's really just an easygoing song to listen to. And I think that's what they were going for here. If you listen to this album start to finish, you can really hear that they're trying to take you on a bit of an emotional roller coaster and kind of tell you a little bit of a story. I know I've come back to that second time now, but I really think it's important that this album is listened to from start to finish to really appreciate the strength of each of these songs and how they fit in with the last and with the next. On top of those really, those feel-good songs that are on the album, there's also the heavy hitters in Last Chance to Dance and Resentment. Now, Last Chance to Dance is probably the most hardcore-based song A Day to Remember has released to date. The riffs are really straight up, almost like Gideon-style heavy, and I really just appreciate that song as a whole. I think the breakdown at the end is pretty sick as well. And then we have Resentment, and if you want my personal opinion, I think Resentment might be the best single song A Day to Remember has ever written. I think it encapsulates every part of the band that's really good, from the heaviness to the emotional sound to the melodies. I think this song literally is their crowning achievement as a band, and just it existing on this album alone, I think places this album as one of their better albums in recent years. I really do think that this album has a ton of potential, and I think if anything, these songs have a little bit more depth than at first they would seem to have. There's a little bit more to latch onto, and it takes a little bit longer to listen to these to really appreciate them. And again, in an era where everyone wants instant gratification, some people don't really appreciate that. Some people don't appreciate being able to latch onto or understand the song and get that vibe on the first listen. And they want to have that on the first listen. And sometimes it takes a couple listens to really appreciate an album and appreciate a song. And I think this is definitely one of those albums. So all things considered, guys, I really think this is an excellent album for A Day to Remember. I think this is one of the best albums they've released in quite a long time. Every single time I listen to it, I find it just super catchy from start to finish. I think this has some of those emotional vibes that people are looking for after having to deal with all of the crap for the pandemic for the past year. It's got those feel-good moments, it's got those angry moments to get your feelings out, and it's just got those catchy moments that get stuck in your head. I definitely recommend giving this another listen, guys, especially if you listen to a couple songs on YouTube and it really turned you off. Listen to the whole thing start to finish before making your final opinion on the album. And if you don't like it, that's totally cool, guys. Let me know if you've listened to the album start to finish and the impression you got after you listened to it. Did you not like the album? I'd like to hear why. Let me know down below in the comments, guys. I want to hear all of your opinions on it. If you like this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button. And if you like the content you're seeing here, make sure to hit subscribe. I know I haven't come at you guys with a bunch of music-related videos lately, but to be honest with you, there hasn't been a ton of releases. I intend on doing album reviews as much as I can. Other than that, guys, I want to thank you for checking out this video. As always, I hope you all have a fantastic day. And until next time, we'll see you soon.